Brother Han, all is prepared. We can attack the royal shelter whenever we desire. Qi Xiuan returned to the Black God shelter and reported to Han Sen that he had successfully enlisted the aid of Li Xingluan and Philip for the assault. Well done. We will follow your plan. Han Sen was looking over the plan Qi Xiuan had formulated. Brother Han, there is no need to worry. I won't disappoint you. We will take this royal shelter for ourselves. Qi Xiuan then told Han Sen, purposefully deceiving him. His heart was sneering, "Oh, we will take the royal shelter. But its owner won't be you, Han Senator, no. It will be me." Han Sen looked at Qi Xiuan, who wore an earnest, faithful face. Then he smiled, patted his shoulder, and told him, "Go. I have faith in you." Han Sen was not a person who enjoyed being kept busy. He did enjoy watching others be busy, however. After Qi Xiuan left, young Monli approached Han Sen with a worried look on her face. She said, "Is it really okay to let Qi Xiuan handle the entire plan of attacking the royal shelter?" Han Sen smiled and responded, "The Black God shelter belongs to Donglin. Allowing Qi Xiuan to make the plans will free us up to do our best in battle. For our attack against the royal shelter, this will be a good thing." "And what happens after we attack the shelter?" Young Monli was not as optimistic as Han's senator. It seemed as if her eyebrows were perpetually furrowed, and she frowned without ever allowing her forehead to relax. "Don't worry. That royal shelter will be owned by Han," Han Sen answered. Young Monli noticed how confident Han Sen appeared, so despite her continued worry and reservations, she didn't push her concerns any further. The troops of the various shelters were now mobile and nearing the royal shelter. Bravely, they moved to the outskirts of the shelter to clear out any creatures around it, in preparation for the big battle that was to come. With everyone camped out and ready, they waited for the time they would be split into groups of 3 and sent out to follow the commands given to them. Han Sen's group was the most powerful, and they were the ones assigned to attack the main gate. Han Sen was following Qi Xiuan's plan to a T, without making a single change. As a result, Qi Xiuan was feeling rather cocky. He believed that Han Sen trusted him entirely, and that he had wrapped Han Sen around his little finger. If that wasn't the case, why else would he be doing exactly what he was told? Qi Xiuan almost felt bad for being so manipulative. "Just wait until I get the royal shelter. If he listens to what I tell him, then I won't treat him too poorly." This was a thought propagated by Qi Xiuan's heart, but it wasn't soon before his mind questioned such judgment. This sort of man is not suitable for important responsibilities. If the person in charge cannot be cruel and unforgiving, then it is only a matter of time before others try to take advantage and attempt to trample on me. The siege began. The beasts that were behind the walls of the shelter, dozens of miles away, could be heard roaring. The tension began to bubble and boil as they approached the battlegrounds. And finally, everyone marched forward to do combat with the creatures that would stay their advance. Far away, on the slopes of a snowy mountain, a fit woman watched the battle unfold. She talked to herself, saying, "I should be able to see what his power is from here." Far away, on the other side of the battlefield, a little girl stood and observed the scene, too. She had long black hair that almost reached the ground. In her arms, she held a silver fox. Although this was a siege, only a few people from the goddess shelter fought alongside Han's senator. Those backing him up were not very strong, and most of them were commanded by Qi Xiuan and positioned elsewhere. But this time, Qi Xiuan did not see the silver-haired spirit. This made him feel strange. Qi Xiuan did not know that the silver-haired spirit would not leave the spirit hall, and he was afraid Han Sen might run ahead and try to steal the spirit stone. But Han Sen did not care all that much. He wore blood-scale armor and held his 2 favorite swords in his hands. With young Monli and his other fighters, he led their offense against the main gate. Qi Xiuan had given Han Sen this position, where the creatures were the strongest. With only a few people from the goddess shelter backing him up, he had hoped the monsters would eliminate them. But instead of slowly battling their way forward, Han Sen and his people instead decided to rush ahead madly. Qi Xiuan shook his head at the sight, and the conflicted voices inside him argued once more, "That person is brave. I'll give him that. But he's just as stupid. It's hard to do business with such a person. But then again, someone as brave as that may come in handy sometime in the future." Qi Xiuan, lost in thought, suddenly noticed the presence of a multitude of cracks in the ground, stemming from the royal shelter. And then, an endless parade of silver beetles burst out towards the battlefield like a flood. The fight had only just begun, but already, the silver ladybug had decided to make an appearance. This was vastly different than the last time, when it showed up right at the end. Qi Xiuwen frowned, but had already made preparations for its coming. If he didn't, then it would have been impossible for him to convince Li Xingluan and Philip to attack the shelter. The signal was sent, and all the soldiers opened their backpacks and lobbed creature meat out across the field. Within seconds, the entire snowy field was drenched like a frothy pool of blood. The silver beetles did not differentiate between friend or foe, or even acknowledge who their aggressors were. But when they smelled the blood, they were immediately attracted to the mound of bloody flesh that was built up. With them out of the way and distracted, an empty space presented itself. "Get in there," Qi Xiuwen shouted. All the human evolvers evaded the ladybugs and ran forward, using their strongest attacks as they advanced towards the royal shelter. But when Qi Xiuwen turned to look at the main gate, he saw Han Sen and his people were already there. The speed with which they had cleared a path came as a shock to him. The creatures at the main gate were the strongest, and despite that, Han Sen's team had not suffered a single casualty. Han Sen was in the front, clasping two swords. One was silver, and one was purple. As he fought, it was like he was dancing, and every step he took around a monster was accompanied with another lesion in his foe, spewing blood. Powerful skills, sure, but he is still a stupid man. Qi Xiuwen looked at the sky above the royal shelter. In his heart, he thought, this royal shelter has been host to great swathes of creatures. Thunderdevil will come in from the other side, though, and he should reach the spirit hall before Han Sen does. I just hope they are able to tame and subdue the spirit there. Whatever royal spirit resides in this place must be a maddening foe, and one that is worthy of a great deal of coin. While Qi Xiuwen was thinking, he saw Han Sen was already leading people inside the shelter. Because of the appearance of the silver beetles, many creatures had run off, which lessened the resistance they faced. Qi Xiuwen did not dare slow down, so he ran towards the shelter from another path. Still, he wasn't in too much of a rush because there was no way Han Sen could be faster than Thunderdevil. By the time Han Sen reached the spirit hall, he was sure that the spirit inside would have been tamed by his secret ally already. However, what Qi Xiuwen did not notice amidst all the chaos was a silver fox that had managed to slip inside the shelter. It was running towards Han Sen, too. Yang Manli, Zhu Ting, Uncle Qing, and the rest of his people now followed Han Sen as he entered the royal shelter. But when they entered there, they were shocked to see a far greater number of creatures on the inside than the outside. And what was more, there were many sacred blood variants mixed in. It seemed as if the spirit would not have to come out and join the fight. There are far too many creatures here. Should we wait until the other groups show up? Zhu Ting looked around nervously. They were the only ones who had rushed in, and the others were quite far behind. There is no need to wait, Han Sen said, and as he did, a silver fox leapt onto his shoulder. Zhu Ting and his people were shocked and a little uncertain when they saw the vast host of powerful creatures now confronting them. Their presence consumed his entire vision, and their numbers far exceeded the 200 Han Sen had with him. They weren't even all that talented. So, it was hard to imagine what slaughter might transpire if they started to attack. Even if the creatures queued up and allowed them to fight one-on-one, it would only be a matter of time before each battler became too exhausted to fight and was killed. Even Uncle Qing, the old man who had seen much, bore a bleak face. Seeing that the creatures did not budge, he did not dare enter and provoke them. Han Sen, however, ran into the creatures alone. The others were unsure of whether or not to follow him. The next second, Yang Manli, Uncle Qing, and Zhu Ting were left staring in disbelief. As Han Sen ran towards the monsters, they parted like an ocean, as if they were afraid of him. They seemed frightened, and they each scrambled out of the way. Whenever Han Sen took a step forward, another creature took a step back. Even a titan snake that was 100 feet long fell back and dared not hit him. Seeing Han Sen march in like a god was a strange thing to watch. Young Monli and the rest had their jaws on the floor, and they almost couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Boss, are you going to heaven?" Zhu Ting followed. Uncle Qing and the rest followed as well, despite their frightened and bewildered looks. As they followed Han Sen, the creatures that were near would run off as soon as they got close. He was truly like some deity, striking fear into the bones of every monster in the shelter. How can he do that? Young Monli had a puzzled expression when she looked at Han Sen, and she couldn't imagine what sort of powers he was employing. Uncle Qing looked faithful, and maybe a little bit fanatical when he looked at Han Sr. He really is the heir of Master Han, isn't he? He does possess magical powers. He does. For the others, they either thought they were witnessing was an absolute miracle or they were dreaming. Han Sen brought young Monli and the rest to the spirit hall. He was familiar with this place and did not want to waste any more time. So he rushed in as soon as he arrived. Not situated too far from the wall of the royal shelter, Queen was able to see everything. She too was quite surprised. How did he do that? Although some medicine could repel certain creatures, such items would not work when facing creatures under the direct command of a spirit, especially such large numbers of them. This heightened Queen's interest in Han Sen, so she made sure to take extra care in her observations. From a distance, of course. Finally, Qi Xiuan managed to enter the shelter with his people. What he saw gave him the jinkies and scared him quite a bit. There were creatures everywhere, and in far greater numbers than what they faced on the battlefield outside. There were even many sacred blood creatures waiting for them. But he could not see where Han Sen or his people had gone, and neither could he see any sign of a struggle or battle. It was as if Han Sen and his people had pulled a Houdini, vanishing without a trace. That is strange. Where are they? Qi Xiuan was confused, but he couldn't spend too much time dwelling on it. A large group of creatures approached, and everyone thrust themselves into a terrifying battle with the monsters that had come for them. At this time, Han Sen and his people were right outside the spirit hall, and they had gotten there with no trouble. Young Monli wanted to shake herself, as if trying to wake up from some weird dream. After she saw the gold and silver lady spirits, she couldn't help but say, "The twin spirits resides in this shelter? You guys take a break, sit and watch. I'll take care of this." Han Sen had trained his dual skill for the longest time with the aim of taking down the twin spirits. He didn't want anyone else to join in, for he wanted to beat it by himself. Besides, the people from the other shelters had yet to arrive. If they beat the twin spirits too soon, many creatures would run off as well. The reward everyone could achieve would be reduced. So he wanted to wait for Qi Xiuan and the rest to arrive before finishing off the spirit. Uncle Qing and his people were already treating his words like gospel, and now they watched Han Sen go towards the twin spirits like he truly was their religious deity going into battle. They were each stricken with a strange feeling, however, one that they couldn't quite place their finger on. Massive numbers of creatures in the royal shelter just stood and watched Han Sen begin combat with the twin spirits. They weren't doing anything, and it was so bewildering that if they told this story to others who were not here to see this happen, people would chalk them up as liars or plain crazy. Han Sen's kidneys were brimming with energy and his heart was jumping like rhythmic thunder. His body felt as if it had boundless power. As he held onto his purple and silver swords, he ran towards the twin spirits without hesitation. The twin spirits hated Han Senator, tightly clutching their gold and silver swords. They went to fight against their pestering nemesis once more. Each strike was brought down like gold and silver lightning. These are some really good skills. It is no wonder why they are royal spirits. Is the boss going to be okay battling them both? As Zhu Ting finished his words, he saw Han Sen use his two swords to batter the twin spirits with such force, it sent them rocketing through the air. Invincible. Everyone had this word on their mind. Han Sen's powerful sword and skills had resulted in the twin spirits being stripped of its ability to fight back. No matter how quickly or powerfully the twin spirits attacked, Han Sen was always one step ahead. Both of Han Sen's hands held a sword, and each one was performing a different sword skill to do battle with the twin spirits. And as he fought and fought, the twin spirits were being beaten back further and further. The boss is too cool. The boss is the man. One man taking on two girls? Damn, he is the best. The young men in the back were waving their flags in support. It was surreal. This was supposed to be a battleground of bloody war, but it was more like they were sitting back to watch a show in an arena. The faces of the twin spirits looked terrible. Before, they could go against Han Sen without any trouble. But now, they could not keep up with him and were repeatedly being knocked backwards. They did not have the power to fight back. Then Han Sen ran into the center of the spirit hall. On the other side of the royal shelter, there resided dozens of elite-killing creatures. A path formed between them as the bodies of countless creatures slumped and staggered away to form mounds of the deceased. Along the bloody path others now walked. They were trying to find the spirit shelter. The leader of these people was cloaked in green lightning, and he held a long sword that flashed, sparked, and crackled with electricity. The creatures that were hit by this sword were sent flying backwards, burned into charcoal by the airborne fire that charged his weapon. This group of people marched forward, uninhibited by the creatures that attempted to stop them. This was Thunder Devil and his men. But no matter how fast they cleaved away forward, they were not as fast as Han Sen, who did not even have to fight any creatures. Besides, Thunder Devil and his people did not know where the spirit hall was. They spent a long while looking for it, but they were still unable to find it. Then, he bumped into Qi Xiuwen. "What are you guys still doing here?" Qi Xiuwen saw Thunder Devil and his people with much surprise. "This royal shelter is way too big. It's easy to get lost. We are unable to find where the spirit hall is. We have already scoured the other end of the shelter, so it has to be this way." Thunder Devil pointed in the direction he was going. "Let's get going then. The people from the other two shelters are on their way too. We can't let them get there first," Qi Xiuwen said. Then, merging with the forces of Thunder Devil, they marched towards the spirit shelter. Yang Manli and her people followed Han Sen to the spirit hall, where Han Sen used his swords to utterly suppress the twin spirits. Through his ceaseless barrage of sword strikes, the twin spirits could not gain ground and push back, and it fell back further and further. There is something sinister and malevolent about this Han Senator. He has been in the second god's sanctuary for less than a year. So how can he be so powerful? He is somehow managing to suppress two royal spirits simultaneously. And as for what happened earlier, Zhu Ting bore a strange look, and he seemed to be disturbed by his thoughts. Pang! The twin spirits had been pushed back as far as possible, and now had its back to a statue. The pretty faces of the royal spirits looked pale and hopeless. The silver snake sword and ancient mascot sword were each pressed against a spirit's neck. Seeing both of the spirits down on their knees, with pitiable and saddened looks on their faces, Han Sen felt remarkably happy. Once, these had almost cost him his life by severely injuring him. Today, he was finally able to turn the tides and win back some of the pride he had lost that time. "Quickly, kill them and grab the spirit stone," someone shouted from behind. "There is no rush. I will wait a little longer." Han Sen did not finish off the spirits yet. He just continued to rest the swords against their necks. He wanted to provide more time for Qi Xiuwen and the rest to slay more creatures for a greater bounty when the day was over. Although Qi Xiuwen had a curious conflict of interest brewing in his heart, it was something he managed to mostly ignore. With the power of Thunder Devil and the Black God Shelter, they were assuredly the strongest force across the ice field. He thought it was practically guaranteed that he would take the royal shelter for himself. Even if Li Xingluan and Philip wanted to prevent him from taking it over, any attempt at retaliation would be futile. There was absolutely no one who could go up against Thunder Devil. Finally, Qi Xiuwen found the spirit hall. As he approached its entrance, however, he was almost disturbed to notice the complete absence of creatures. Even more unnerving were the half-jovial sounds of human talk resonating from inside. Qi Xiuwen and Thunder Devil looked at each, acknowledging what they were both thinking. Together, they ran into the spirit hall. With the rest accompanying, a larger host entered the spirit hall behind them. Qi Xiuwen's pupils decreased into little beads after he was inside. He saw the people that were supposed to be fighting elsewhere in the spirit shelter reclined in the spirit hall. Han Sen already stood next to a statue, reaching out his hand to grab the spirit stone that was embedded within. "It is the twin spirits," Qi Xiuan saw Han Sen holding a gold sword and a silver sword, with the twin spirits standing in concession beneath the blades. He couldn't have been more surprised. Seeing Han Sen take the two spirit stones, the silver-haired lady and golden-haired lady then ceremoniously knelt before Han Senator. They lowered both of their proud heads and spoke in tandem. Yin Princess and Yang Princess are willing to submit and offer absolute loyalty to a new master. We can become the most faithful of servants. Everyone else was now on their feet, staring at the princesses who were kneeling and swearing fealty to Han Sen. This was a pair of princess spirits. It was rare enough to see a royal-class spirit make such a vow, but to have two of them do it at the same time was almost unbelievable. In each of Han Sen's hands rested a spirit stone, one silver and one gold. He placed the stones on the Yin Princess and Yang Princess's foreheads. They then became one with their stones, disappearing into them in a blinding light. Everyone continued to stand there, just watching. The taking of a royal spirit was something few people would ever see. And for it to be the twin spirits above all, was something might happen once every 100 years at best. When the royal spirits were taken, the creatures inside the shelter lost their reason to remain and defend what was previously their home, and so they fled. A little while later, Li Xingluan and Philip arrived at the spirit hall. "Aren't you guys supposed to be hunting the creatures? What are you doing here?" Han Sen turned to survey the hall with his eyes, which after one long pan, ended up on Qi Xiuan. Qi Xiuan sighed and said, "Brother Han, you are so blessed. You must be really lucky to have been able to tame the twin spirits." All of a sudden, Qi Xiuan's tone of voice changed. "But you cannot live off the merit of luck your entire life. Brother Han, I will be taking this shelter, okay?" "Qi Xiuan, do you not remember the promise made between Tang's family and Donglin?" Han Sen kept his stare on Qi Xiuan as he spoke. The promise between Donglin and Tang's family only applied to the Black God shelter. "This isn't the Black God shelter, now is it?" Qi Xiuan smiled. Li Xingluan and Philip looked at each other, as if to confirm they were about to do something in tandem. But all of a sudden, Qi Xiuan made a gesture with his hand. In seconds, countless soldiers from the Black God shelter swarmed every corner of the hall. "This is between me and Brother Han, so please don't interrupt us." "Thanks, I appreciate that," Qi Xiuan told Li Xingluan and Philip. "Qi, you promised that the three of us would be in charge once we took the shelter. You are going to take it all for yourself?" Philip said coldly. "This world is reserved for the strong. Even if I did give it to you, could you honestly hold on to this shelter?" Qi Xiuan then gave a signal which made the evolvers around him assume battle stances. There were more than 40 evolvers with a fitness level of over 100. The faces of Li Xingluan and Philip changed. Both of their shelters only had 10 evolvers with a fitness level of over 100. Black God Shelter, however, was only supposed to contain 20. How could there now be so many? Against so many evolvers with such a level, it would have been impossible for them to fight back. And so they reverted to silence. Yang Monli scowled, as did the rest of her compatriots. A battalion such as that would be enough to sweep clean the entirety of the ice field. Qi Xiuan was right, however. Only the strong could thrive and become formidable leaders. The power Qi Xiuan had now was truly enough to assert control over anything he desired upon the ice field. It would be pointless for anyone to resist. "Brother Han, you and I were friends. It is a shame we do not see eye to eye on this. But if you pledge fealty to me and swear obedience, I will keep you by my side. Our relationship can remain the way it was, except our roles will be reversed." Qi Xiuan, empowered with a feeling of dominance, spoke to Han Sen in a tone marinated with the bitter sauce of bluster. "Qi Xiuan, you honestly think these people can stop me?" Han Sen stroked the silver fox in his arms and asked his question calmly. Qi Xiuan smiled and responded, "Brother Han is very powerful. This is something I acknowledge, and I would not dare look down on you, if this is what you fear." After that, Qi Xiuan pointed to the man at his side, Thunder Devil. He then said, "I can only assume you do not know who this person is, so allow me to introduce you. This is the most talented evolver in Donglin. This is Thunder Devil. Few people could ever hope to be as talented as him. He is a successful learner of the skill Thunder Core. He also unlocked his first gene lock in the second god's sanctuary. He is quite the rarity in the alliance. Everyone's faces changed as they looked at Thunder Devil in fright. If he had been able to unlock his first gene lock in the second god's sanctuary, the man by Qi Xiuwen's side was undoubtedly a genius. He looked to be between 40 and 50, so already having such an achievement as a notch in his belt was remarkable. Silence deafened the ears of all in the hall. Qi Xiuwen had with him an elite who had already unlocked his first gene lock. This sort of power would not simply mop up its adversaries, but crush them into dust. The hall had never been so quiet, and a sad realization dawned in the hearts of all who were there. Their hope had been depleted, and with this man and his crushing power present, the fear of losing everything in the ice field to Qi Xiuwen was all too real. Brother Han, you have treated me like a little brother. If you are willing to help me, I will treat you with the reverence of a real brother. Qi Xiuwen looked at Han Sen when he spoke. If I said I was willing to help you, would you honestly believe I would? Han Sen responded, looking calmly back at Qi Xiuwen. I see no reason why I would not believe you, but I do have medicine with me. It is my hope that you will take it. Qi Xiuwen had no fear of anything. He pulled out a platinum bottle from his inner chest pocket and threw it towards Han Sen. Han Sen caught the bottle and opened it. It contained numerous fire crystal-looking pills that were about the same size as a pigeon's eye. What are these pills? Han Sen held one of the pills in his hand and looked at it in the light. He noticed the hardened exterior of the pill contained a rolling liquid inside. It's a geno-creation pill. Our Dong Lin contains fantastic biological gene technology. This is just one of our products. Once you eat it, it can trigger genome mutations. There's every chance it could make you stronger, but Qi Xiuwen gave a brief pause. After a while, he resumed by saying, but there is also the chance your genes suffer a snafu of sorts. But don't you worry. If you inject yourself with a genostabilizer, you can stabilize the mutant genes. It won't harm your body. This isn't some fresh product that has just come out the oven. It's mature and has been extensively developed. Nothing will go wrong. If I take this, then that would mean I would have to listen to you for the rest of my life. Han Sen spoke with a frosty tone as he looked at the geno-creation pill. I must confess, I wouldn't let a character such as yourself out of my sight for very long. If I let you leave, my thoughts and dreams would be disturbed. That is why I must put you on a leash as soon as I am able, Qi Xiuwen said. You have more than 40 evolvers with a fitness level of over 100, and you have an elite who has unlocked their first gene lock. It looks like you have exerted a lot of effort in composing this little posse of yours. Han Sen looked around the room, observing the faces of all who were present. Brother Han is a very powerful person. Such preparations were necessary. If I wasn't going to stake a claim and take this royal shelter for myself, I wouldn't have bothered Thunder Devil to come all this way. Qi Xiuwen smiled. You really think that special little elite in your midst is invincible? Han Sen went back to stroking his silver fox. He then raised his lips in a disdainful smile. Did you just say, special little elite? You better watch your tone, boy. Thunder Devil's face now changed as he glared fiercely at Han Sen, green electricity crackling all around his body. When everyone saw the electricity that swirled, snapped, and crackled around Thunder Devil, their hope for a happy ending vanished. This really was an elite who had unlocked their first gene lock, and he was no foe to be trifled with. Mr. Qi, there is no need to entertain this tiring chit-chat with the boy. If he does not quickly agree, then just kill him. Thunder Devil maintained his gaze on Han Sen while he spoke to Qi Xiuwen. Brother Han, please consider it. Qi Xiuwen was getting annoyed. What's the problem? I was being honest. An elite who has unlocked their first gene lock? Am I supposed to be afraid or something? You're pulling my leg, right? Did you think this clown would frighten me? Han Sen said, with a frostbitten tone. After Han Sen said this, everyone's faces warped into looks of disbelief. No one believed Han Sen would have the audacity to say something like that. To show contempt towards an elite of such a high rank was near enough to asking for death. To call the elite a clown, Han Sen must have lost his mind. Do you have a death wish, boy? Electricity now swirled madly around Thunder Devil, and green bolts of lightning cracked in his eyes. Han Sen's disrespect seemed to have made him extremely angry. Qi Xiuan had not given the order to attack yet, so Thunder Devil stayed put. Brother Han, if you continue to be so stubborn, then don't blame me for what happens next. Qi Xiuan's face looked bleak. He turned to look at Thunder Devil, then nodded. Thunder Devil had already come to dislike Han Senator. He was not accustomed to being looked down upon by someone who had not yet unlocked their own first gene lock. He thought Han Sen didn't know his place. The moment Qi Xiuan nodded, fierce shieldings of electricity surrounded Thunder Devil. He was wholly consumed by the green aura of airborne fire. His hands clutched a long physical bolt of lightning and threw it like a javelin towards Han Sen. With the terrifying scene that was now unfolding, everyone took a step back to avoid being struck by Thunder Devil's thunder and lightning. He was so bright, they could not even see Thunder Devil's body. All that could be heard was the swirling pressure of crackling static and electricity. Han Sen then saw the incoming spear of lightning. This scary power made everyone's hearts pound in fear, but it also gave them each a modicum of jealousy, wishing they could one day attain such talent. All of them desired to one day unlock their first gene lock, but realistically, only 1 in a million was likely to achieve such a status. But between their jealousy and frightened emotional state, they thought they were going to have to watch Han Sen be slain by the Thunder Devil. However, it was at that moment that the silver fox Han Sen had been holding leapt into action. A silver cloud of lightning appeared and annihilated the incoming spear of green electricity. Then, more thunder snapped the skies apart. Before it could finish, it was joined by a chorus of screams. The Thunder Devil, who once struck fear into the hearts of everyone present, was now blackened and charred. Then he fell to the floor. There were 3 gouge marks in his body, wounds that were deep enough to reveal his bones. He writhed around on the floor, unable to stand back up. The audience quaked in their boots, in utter disbelief at the sight of Thunder Devil squirming around on the ground. When the screaming stopped, the spirit hall fell silent. Not even the sounds of breathing could be heard from the crowd that watched. No way. How? What happened? How can an elite who has unlocked their first gene lock be beaten by a little pet fox? Everyone was speechless, and their minds were now plagued with 1,000 different questions over what they had just witnessed. All they could do was look at Thunder Devil, who was rolling around on the floor. The color in Qi Xiuan's face drained, and a chill spiked his heart. He could not believe his ace in the hole had been beaten so simply. He was an elite who had unlocked his first gene lock. After all, pang! Han Sen picked up the silver fox and stroked him in his arms once more. Then he walked up to the ground-bound Thunder Devil and kicked him in front of Qi Xiuan. Did I say clown? I'm sorry. This guy is an insult to clowns. Is this who you were relying on? Han Sen looked at Qi Xiuan, who now bore a pale face. Thunder Devil, who was near Qi Xiuan's feet, was spilling blood from his mouth. It looked as if he was on death's door. Qi Xiuan and his 40 other elites looked absolutely petrified. They did not dare to move. The teeth of the audience were chattering, and their bodies were shivering in fear and uncertainty. Qi Xiuan must have thought he was suffering an unrelenting nightmare. He had more than 40 elites, one of which had unlocked his first gene lock. This powerful lineup, that had seemed to dwarf the rest in the hall, now seemed like a pitiful joke. Yes, it was ridiculous. Qi Xiuan had believed he controlled the crushing power necessary to subdue any foe that sought to hinder his goals and desires. Now, he believed it was ridiculous. This man, who listened to everything and never said no, Qi Xiuan had thought to be stupid. But now, he revered Han Sen like some god. He could hardly look at him, and all he could do was shiver in his boots. It was in this moment that Qi Xiuan realized Han Sen never once took him seriously, and that the entire time he had been with him, he must have been merely enjoying the comedy. It was as if he had been watching an ant, being arrogant and trying to bully others. His behavior had been ridiculous and all his plans were childish. All of a sudden, Qi Xiuan's confidence collapsed and with it, he fell to the ground. Today, I saw a lot. He is too strong. That elite had unlocked his first gene lock, but Han Sen whipped him like a dog. It's sick. That guy's little pet dog absolutely ravaged the elite who had managed to unlock his first gene lock. If that was his pet, How strong must he himself be? What pet dog? It was a pet cat. It was stronger than a dog, no matter what it was. It possessed the strength of a god. Han Sen didn't even have to do anything. All he did was talk until he decided to sick the fiend on Thunder Devil. This is madness. You guys weren't there. None of you saw the look on Qi Xiuan and his followers' faces. There were a few hundred evolvers there, 40 of them with a fitness level of more than 100. All of them possessed a fair amount of might, but in front of Han Sen, none of them even dared to pass wind. They were afraid of doing anything that might tick Han Sen off, perhaps inciting him to slay them all in one fell swoop. Qi Xiuan was so frightened, he almost had a heart attack and died. If you ever have a role model, whose footsteps you would be keen to follow in, make it Han Senator that way, you will achieve true happiness.
Be Han Sen.
You wouldn't even qualify to be his pet.
Pet?
You guys think you can match that pet of his? That pet killed the fellow with an unlocked gene lock. Han Sen could put you to work as a dishcloth, but beyond that, I doubt he'd find any use for you guys. Well, one thing has become a certainty. The ice field are now the domain of Han Sr. Of course, he is unique. I bet you'd never find anyone else remotely like him elsewhere. And I'm not talking about just the ice field. This guy would most likely be the cream of the crop no matter which shelter he went to. I've seen a lot in my time, but rarely have I been this excited. You didn't get to see the way those high and mighty elites looked that day. When they saw what Han Sen did, they were like children approaching an abusive father. After the fighting that took place in the royal shelter, the ice field changed. The three factions that governed the ice field were broken. Han Sen took the royal shelter and formed an alliance with Li Xingluan and Philip, which led to the formation of a new goddess shelter. The three armies were then split into four. Yang Monli was made leader of the goddess army. Li Xingluan was put in charge of the Starwheel army. Philip became the leader of the Philip army, and lastly, Qiu Xuan was made leader of the Black God army. Han Sen remained leader of the goddess shelter, but was unsatisfied with the title. He thought leader lacked a certain flair. Han Sen did not kill Qi Xiuan, though, because that would only cause more problems in the future. He also needed the strength of Qi Xiuan's men to keep the new royal shelter in fine operation. Han Sen did not fear the possibility being betrayed again, either. The three factions worked together to bring down the royal shelter, with the Black God shelter receiving the most benefits. But because of the treachery enacted by Qi Xiuan and his men, all their potential rewards were forfeited and given to Han Sen exclusively. Qi Xiuan did not receive a penny or a scrap of meat. Despite all of his rewards being taken by Han Sen, however, he did not complain once. He was merely happy enough to be walking away with his head still attached to his shoulders. Han Sen was no longer a man he would be keen to trifle with. Han Sen also gave the goddess army the greatest boons. If they required it, they could buy creature meat at very low prices. This meant the power of the troops in his army could increase at a much faster rate. Not only that, but following the news of his triumph over Qi Xiuan's treachery, many more people came to enlist in the goddess army. It didn't take long before the ranks of Han Sen's own army increased substantially. Although the army's power was trailing behind the other three, at its new trajectory, it would soon surpass them. Eat. Eat until your bellies are full. There is no need to save me some. Han Sen prepared a truck-sized feast of sacred blood meat for the angels to dine on. This time, Han Sen had received the bodies of 4 different sacred blood creatures. They were killed by Qi Xiuan and Thunder Devil, but it was Han Sen who became the recipient of their meat. Unfortunately, however, they were too big. Han Sen roasted a good deal of the meat and took to eating it with 0. The rest was given to the angels to accelerate their growth. Due to the Silver Fox's tremendous performance, Han Sen started looking forward to seeing how the angels would develop as fighters. Aside from the sacred blood meat they were given, there were over 100 mutant beasts to eat as well, not to mention the countless ordinary monsters they had also become recipients of. It would have been impossible for Han Sen to eat them all in any reasonable amount of time, so he had no choice but to sell them. After all, the carcasses of once living creatures could not be kept for long. Han Sen did keep some smaller amounts of mutant creature flesh to eat, and with it, he estimated that within a month, his mutant geno points would be maxed out. It's a shame I am unable to bring the silver fox out to hunt. Otherwise, I would not have to worry about my sacred Geno points either. Han Sen stroked the silver fox that continued to rest in his arms and couldn't help but feel disappointed. Boss, I have formulated the account. Young Monli had prepared a ledger for Han Sen, but when she came near to deliver it, her eyes could not look away from the silver fox. The silver fox had earned quite the name for itself across the ice field. It was the pet that had killed an elite who had unlocked his gene lock in a single hit. After all, it was difficult to imagine something so small dealing such vast amounts of damage. Young Monli had seen the silver fox before, but she believed it to be an ordinary pet. It only seemed natural, as Han Sen played with it frequently. She never imagined it had such terrifying powers. It was a frightening little thing. Han Sen took a look at the ledger and was startled to learn that the sum of money they had received from selling the excess meat in the past few days was in the billions. If they started running the royal shelter, the income they would receive would be unimaginable. They'd end up rivaling the income generated from mega-corporations that ran entire planets. Of course, it couldn't possibly rival a galactic mega-corporation, but Han Sen was happy to settle for his current projections. With this royal shelter, even if Han Sen didn't lift a finger from this point on, he would be able to live a life of absolute luxury. But this was meaningless to Han Sen, because wealth was not his purpose. Money was useless to him if he couldn't achieve the power he was striving for. After young Monli left, Han Sen lifted the bottle of Geno creation pills he had held on to. The last time he brought it out, the silver fox had shown great interest in eating them. But Han Sen didn't let him, as he worried various problems might arise. He wasn't sure if mutating genes was a bad thing or not, and it was different than the consumption of mutant flesh. The silver fox reached out its paws and tried to grab a hold of the bottle. It seemed as if it greatly desired to eat them. Han Sen hesitated for a good while, but in the end, he opened the lid and pulled one out. He placed it in the palm of his hand and folded his fingers into a fist to prevent the silver fox from taking it, as it desperately wanted to. Are you sure you won't have any problems eating this? Han Sen wasn't sure if the silver fox could understand him, but he still asked. The silver fox quickly nodded, as if it was a genuine response to the question. Then, it moved to rub its head on Han Sen's closed fist. Han Sen paused to think for some time, but then opened his hand. Quickly, the silver fox gobbled up the pill. Han Sen observed the silver fox intently, anxiously waiting to see if there were any changes. He had obtained a fair amount of geno-stabilizers from Qi Xiuwen, so if a problem arose, he was confident in his ability to fix it. After a while, the only change he noticed was the silver fox's hair. Somehow, it looked a little brighter. But aside from that, nothing. The silver fox tried to claw at the empty bottle, as if he was still hungry for them. It looks like the Geno creation pills are not strong enough to mutate a super creature, Han Sen thought to himself.
Han Sen, you rock.
How did you do that? You dealt Dong Lin a significant blow. In the communicator, Tang Zhenliu was staring at Han Sen in awe. That person in Dong Lin looked for Tang's family, desiring reconciliation with Han Sen. That money is for his son's life. Han Sen looked at Tang Zhenliu's list and smiled. What's going on? You made a move on his son? Tang Zhenliu looked at Han Sen with an expression of surprise. I didn't do anything to his son. He came after me. Han Sen told Tang Zhenliu the tale of what had occurred in the royal shelter. You're telling me you killed an evolver who had unlocked their first gene lock? You have opened a gene lock too, then, I presume? Tang Zhenliu's eyes were wide, looking at his correspondent's face with much admiration. I'm not that fast, it was just luck. I have a kick-ass pet, and it was my pet that killed Thunder Devil, Han Sen told him, smiling. What sort of pet can be that powerful? If you've got any more for sale, I'll take 10. Tang Zhenliu jested with a hearty laugh. I only have one. I can only surmise that Lady Luck is fond of me when bestowing the fortune to receive such pet. You can't envy me.
Han Sen låg head.
It is no wonder why he was willing to pay you that much. An evolver with an unlocked gene lock was killed by you? Nothing could stand in your way of killing Qi Xiuwen. If that is what you chose to do, Tang Zhenliu said. Of course, but I'm not that stupid. I'm not willing to kill people of small concern. Like him, there'd be no benefit, and if anything, it'd just be a hassle. Retaliation from Dong Lin would likely occur as well. I don't even have that many troops at my command, either. I need to make use of his men to take care of the royal shelter for a while my own army expands. Qi Xiuwen is now a puppet on strings, so I have no fear of any more betrayal. He and his troops will do things honestly and earnestly henceforth. Han Sen continued to peruse the list while he told Tang Zhongli, I suppose I agree with the compensation they are offering, but I don't want these random items or their money. Help me talk to the people in Donglin and have it all swapped for geno creation pills. If those things don't work correctly, they can kill someone. What do you need that many for?
Tang Zhenliang Kirat, frowning.
Han Sen knew what Tang Zhenliang was thinking, so he smiled. He said, Don't worry, I'm not using this stuff to harm anyone. I know how to use them, but anyway, help me talk to them to get this exchange in motion. Okay, I'll get in touch with them. I'll let you know in a few days, most likely. After a while, Tang Zhenliang still wanted to ask once more, Did your pet really kill Thunder Devil? There were many people there, and they can be found all across the ice fields. If you honestly don't believe me, why don't you ask them? I barely lifted a finger. Han Sen spread his hands as he reasserted what had happened. Damn, your luck really does make others jealous. To be able to kill a man who has unlocked their first gene lock, that pet must be way too OP. Why can't I ever be the recipient of such fortune? Tang Zhenliang's face was one of almost anguish in the envy he had for Han Sen. Turning off the communicator, Han Sen went to the royal shelter. The geno creation pills from Dong Lin were not the type of goods that could be purchased in the markets. This was because the alliance forbid them to be sold. If Han Sen wanted to buy some, there was nowhere he could go to do so. Even if he could obtain them through the more illicit routes of trade, they'd cost an arm and a leg. So, getting them directly from the Qi family was undoubtedly the best way to go about their retrieval right now. If the silver fox wanted to eat them so much, perhaps they could provide some major benefits? There would be no harm in having a few more at his disposal anyway. If they turned out to provide the boon he was hoping for, Han Sen thought Qi Xiuwen could stay wrapped around his finger for a while longer. If he ever wanted more, he could go through Qi Xiuwen for them at the family discount. Boss, the silver beetles outside the gate remain. They are not pulling away. We tried killing a few, and we were successful, but it's as if they can respawn in an instant. How should we deal with them? Philip saw Han Sen pass by and made sure to voice his concern over their unwelcome squatters. This Philip was quite something. The reason he was called Philip was because of his gluttonous appetite for fillet steaks. Li Xingluan once said that Philip's family was rather extensive, and he himself was quite talented. If he wasn't, he couldn't be a faction leader in the fragmented ice fields. After all, I will handle this. You guys don't need to do anything. Han Sen then went to look for Zero, and with her and the silver fox in tow, exited the shelter via the main gate. The evolvers out on the road would always allow Han Sen to pass, and many would greet him as courteously as they could. They'd also make sure to pay their respects to the silver fox. That is the pet that killed the guy with an unlocked gene lock. It looks so ordinary. Who would have thought it possessed so much power? Ah, it's so cute. I really want one. Han Sen was holding the silver fox when he passed through the gate, but when he approached the ladybugs, they did not disappear underground. There was a dizzying amount of them, squirming and shimmering like a lake of molten silver. But as Han Sen drew nearer, the presence of the silver fox eventually came to their attention. When it did, some ran away, whereas others burrowed underground as quickly as they could. These silver beetles were very strange. You wouldn't receive an announcement when you killed one. There was no way to obtain a beast soul from them, and their carcasses simply decomposed without providing any meat for consumption. It was the vast number of them that was most curious, though. It would seem no matter how many you killed, they'd always come back. Han Sen held the silver fox and ran around the area in a loop. Wherever he went, the silver beetles would disappear, but whenever he left and later returned, they'd be back. Han Sen summoned Princess Yin's spirit, bringing her pretty shadow to life in front of him. He pointed towards the silver beetles and asked, "What's the deal with these silver beetles?" Princess Yin moved her pretty eyes and said, "They are not exactly creatures." "Well, if they are not creatures, what are they?" Han Sen frowned as he inquired. After all, How could the creatures inside the shelters not be creatures? They would best be described as weapons, Princess In said. Give me the details. Han Sen was quite curious about this revelation, so he pressed further. Princess In then explained, there is a silver beetle mother somewhere underground, and she can constantly reproduce the smaller bugs that you see here. But they're not offspring or babies in the traditional sense, they're more like weapons. Han Sen now understood why killing them was so useless. The actual creature they sought resided underground. Is the silver beetle mother a sacred blood creature?
Han Sen asked.
Yes, Princess In confirmed. Han Sen looked around and said while furrowing his brow, where can she be found? I am unable to control it, as I once could. Therefore, I do not know. As a rough approximation of their burrowed depths, they usually live around 500 meters underground. 500 meters? Han Sen's eyebrows went even tighter. There was no way he would be able to drill 500 meters underground to fight a sacred blood silver beetle mother. But if he did not kill it, it would cost a lot of resources to have people remove their presence, day in, day out. And Han Sen would be the one paying the most. Therefore, he did not want that. It is not difficult to kill the silver beetle mother. In fact, if I had my sister, we could do it together ourselves. In fluttered her beautiful eyes. This is awesome. Han Sen did not think twice and immediately summoned Princess Yang. The beautiful twins, one with silver hair and the other with gold hair, appeared in front of him. Han Sen could not help but gulp as he witnessed their presence before him, side by side. It was a gorgeous sight to behold. Han Sen couldn't take his eyes off Princess In and Princess Yang. The mermaid princess had the ability to control the crystal palace, so he wondered if either of these princesses possessed any special abilities he could employ, as well. Princess In and Princess Yang looked at each other. They raised up their swords together, producing two lights, one silver and one gold. Then, in a flash, they both fused together to become a whole new woman clad in gold and silver armor. One iris was gold, the other silver. One hand clutched a silver sword, whereas the other held a golden sword. They have formed to become one person? Han Sen looked at this new spirit lady they had transformed into. He was puzzled, unable to understand why they did not do this before, when he fought them in the spirit hall. He then watched the lady spirit move towards the cracks in the ground that the silver beetles crawled out of. Extending her silver sword outwards, she drove it down into the crevice. Then, with her remaining gold sword, she swirled and twirled it around in the air. After a while of doing this, Han Sen suddenly felt the ground begin to rumble like an earthquake. Then a squealing noise sounded from below the earth as plumes of dust shot out of the crevice like a dirty exhaust. Boom! The spirit lady continued to wave the golden sword in her hand as the silver sword rattled and returned from its earthen sheath. Through magic, it floated in the air and twirled around the spirit lady in a similar way to the golden sword, until it reached the hand that awaited its return. Master, the silver beetle's mother has been killed, the spirit lady reported to Han Sen. Han Sen didn't need the report, however, for he already knew the result through the notification he had received. Princess In and Princess Yang slew the silver beetle mother. The beast's soul was not acquired. Consume its flesh to obtain a random numeric amount of sacred geno points, ranging from 0 to 10. The silver beetles were round, but they now looked like wilted flowers. As they lay on the ground in lifeless mounds, they quickly decomposed and vanished out of sight. So, this is what it feels like to have someone else do your dirty work. Han Sen opened his eyes wide and looked at the spirit lady with admiration. Master, that was a yin-yang sword skill, not dirty work. Not one for humor, the spirit lady corrected Han Sen. When we used to fight, why did you not use this skill?
Han Sen curiously inquired.
Combining yin and yang together does not increase our power. It only enables me to use this particular sword skill. The yin-yang princess explained. Ah, that's why. If that's the case, then you two should split up. Han Sen believed having two women was better than one, so he recommended they remain as Princess In and Princess Yang. Han Sen then prepared to return to the shelter, but that was when he faintly saw a shadow appear from behind a glacier. When he took a closer look, he noticed that it was Queen. Queen stared at the silver fox in Han Sen's arms and did not even look at him. "Why are you here?" Han Sen frowned, looking at Queen with alarm. If Queen was going to come after the silver fox, he wasn't sure if it could beat her. Although the silver fox was powerful, it was still just a pup. The power was nowhere near what it could one day become. Facing an ordinary evolver who had unlocked the first gene lock seemed to be okay, but the thought of it facing Queen made Han Sen uncertain. The silver fox returned Queen's gaze, just as it did when it first saw Shui Kuang. Queen then turned to look at Han Sen and said, "Your pet seems to be quite special. What class is it?" "Sacred blood class," Han Sen answered Queen immediately, with no hesitation in his lie. Although he knew Queen wanted to hunt super creatures, he did not know if she actually had yet. Because of this, Han Sen did not wish to say anything more. Queen continued to peer at Han Sen, but did not say anything. She then returned her watch to the silver fox and said, "You know, there is still one more class above sacred blood creatures. I formed a team composed of people who have each unlocked their first gene lock. Our purpose is to hunt those monsters. Are you interested? I still haven't unlocked my first gene lock. I thought I wouldn't be qualified to join you," Han Sen said. "With that pet at your side, I would say you are qualified." Queen pointed to the silver fox. "Never mind then. I don't think I have the abilities to go with you. I can't rely on a pet to keep me alive. Besides, the existence of those creatures is little more than a myth. Have you killed any to confirm?"
Han Sen asked.
Queen did not answer. All she said was, "Well, the invitation is always open. If you change your mind, seek me out through Pingqing." And then she left as quickly as she appeared. Queen secretly thought that the creature Han Sen possessed was a super creature, but she had never killed one before. Therefore, she could not be certain, and all she could do was guess. After 100 years of development, humans were getting more and more powerful in the Second God's Sanctuary. Still, humans that could unlock their gene lock in the Second God's Sanctuary were very rare. Queen spent a lot of time trying to gather such individuals, and despite trying her best, she had only been able to invite 7. Most of them had their own territory, so finding 7 people on her own was quite impressive. But even with a team of such considerable power, they still could not kill creatures that were above the sacred blood class. Such foes had the same abilities, but the powers that fueled them were several times stronger. According to their estimations, for humans to unlock their first gene lock, their fitness level would have to reach 300. This was also the level of a celestial being. Once this level was reached and a gene lock was unlocked, only then could they be capable of taking on a super creature. But all of this was nigh impossible to achieve in the Second God's Sanctuary. To kill creatures such as that, humans would need numbers, and they'd have to cooperate. But so far, not a single faction had managed to band together and take one down. And in regards to Han Sen's pet, Queen was captivated by it. Han Sen may not have killed a super creature, but how had he managed to tame one? If Han Sen told her he had already beaten a super creature, she would not have believed him. Although Han Sen was a powerful person, he had not yet unlocked his gene lock. He couldn't survive against a person with an unlocked gene lock by himself. So, if he couldn't do that, he most certainly couldn't go up against a super creature. Queen considered that Han Sen's pet may have been a berserk sacred blood beast soul. Although the chances were slim, that could be what had given it special abilities. But the silver fox was not a beast soul. That meant it had to be a super creature. How could anyone judge her skepticism? After all, no one had been known to tame a creature before. Only those spoken about in legends. The reason why Queen invited Han Sen was because she had witnessed the power of the silver fox and Han Sen together. She used to teach Han Sen, so she could more accurately gauge how he had grown and where he would continue to go. His potential and the likely course of his future was frighteningly impressive. If he unlocked the first gene lock, he'd be a scary master to have and a terrifying foe to face. To be close with a character such as that, Queen was keen to have him in her party as soon as possible. On the other side of the royal shelter was a large mountain. Past the far side of this mountain, however, there wasn't much snow. There was another royal shelter there, controlled by another faction whose owner had unlocked their first gene lock. Developing a shelter on the other side was a difficult thing. The big mountain in between was called Devil's Mountain, and it was occupied by a number of powerful creatures. The slopes of the mountain were coarse, rugged, and steep, which put any would-be fighters on that terrain at a big disadvantage. Only a few people possessed what it took to hunt there, but even those never ventured too far. When Thunderdevil traveled across Devil's Mountain, even he took the long route to avoid the more dangerous zones of that place. According to what Qi Xuan said, the owner of the royal shelter near the Devil's Mountain, called Lu Hui, was the captain of the Blue Blood Reserve Force. He was a powerful man, and although he had unlocked his first gene lock, there was a significant gulf in power between him and Thunderdevil. Han Sen didn't have as many people as he would have liked. The workforce he had was barely enough to keep the royal shelter in operation. His lack of troops was what had driven him to cooperate with others to take the royal shelter. Now that he had taken the ice fields, with the Devil's Mountain at his back for protection, he was near enough a king of the ice fields. If he was able to maintain his hold on the ice fields and stay in his current position, he would earn a lot of money. Han Sen, Super Body, King Spirit, Stage, Evolver, Lifespan, 300. Super Body Evolve Requirement, 100 Geno. Own Geno, Basic Geno, 100. Ordinary Geno, 100. Mutant Geno, 100. Sacred Geno, 39. Han Sen had benefited greatly from his assault on the royal shelter, and now his mutant Geno amount had maxed out. His sacred Geno points had also been given a boost too. His sacred Geno count had reached 39. Right now, if he had to gauge his fitness level based on the Genos he possessed, he'd put it at 150. But that was not because of his training. This number was equal to top-level evolvers. If Han Sen reached Surpasser state, he could ascend to become a celestial being with a fitness level of 300. But Ji Yanran told him that before he became a Surpasser, the higher fitness level he had, the better. There was no need to rush the process. For now, Han Sen's primary goal was to unlock his gene lock. If he didn't, it would not matter if his fitness was higher than evolvers who had already unlocked theirs. He would still be handicapped, and his ability to perform skills would be significantly lessened. I have not been able to finish the first tier of Dongshin Sutra in a reasonable amount of time, so perhaps it would be best if I do give Jade Skin another shot. I hope there won't be any issues with it. Han Sen, with a renewed resolve, decided to try out Jade Skin once more. When he unlocked the first tier of Jade Skin, he should have unlocked his gene lock as well. But this had not come to pass. Han Sen knew that the variant of Jade Skin he had learnt had some issues, but ever since he absorbed the ice powers from Shui Kuang, the skill had changed somewhat. Perhaps through further practice with the skill, he'd be able to unlock his gene lock this time. What concerned Han Sen the most, however, was the possibility of his Jade Skin bringing him negative side effects. The last thing he wanted was to end up with the heart of someone from the Shui family. If he wanted to kill super creatures, which he did, doing so would be impossible for him if he did not unlock his gene lock. Han Sen had the Dongshin Sutra, though, which meant he wasn't too afraid to experiment with Jade Skin once more. Returning to the Alliance, Han Sen entered a training room and began to practice. With Jade Skin running again, cool air emanated from his cells. With ice coursing through his veins, his body felt as if it were being purified. A greater sense of clarity overwhelmed Han Sen's mind, and he perceived the entire world in a different way. He couldn't put finger on the exact nature of the change, though. Human emotions were dictated by greed, jealousy, lust, and desire. Under the effects of Jade Skin, things were different. Han Sen's association with these cornerstones of human emotion seemed to be dying somewhat. His emotions were getting colder. It made Han Sen feel keen, unusually keen. His vision, smell, taste, touch, and hearing were increased as well, but it was the substantial amplification of his sixth sense that surprised him. Han Sen could now hear voices coming from another training room, which was something he had been unable to do before. Although he wasn't cold, Han Sen's body felt somehow chill. His mind was at greater ease. His emotions seemed to be fading away, and he almost didn't feel human. The cells in his body were struggling, almost moaning. It was as if they were now in shackles. Han Sen never felt so restrained before, and as these feelings started to increase, his body started to panic, and he wanted to shatter the chains that bound him. Han Sen felt himself touch the first gene lock, and he acknowledged that the jade skin was different than before. No matter how hard he had trained it in the past, it had never come close to making him feel as he did now. Han Sen believed that if he continued, he would unlock the first gene lock. But the further he went, the more his emotions were stripped away from him. He was afraid of becoming little more than an android, programmed to gain power through any means necessary, all without a heart. He was afraid that if he unlocked his gene lock, he would lose all semblance of his former self. He would be a husk of a human being, someone worse than the Shui family, even. At least the Shui family possessed some form of emotion. Right now, Han Sen couldn't feel anything. He didn't feel happy, sad, or even angry. If he used the jade skin to unlock the gene lock, he ran the possibility of never feeling such emotions again. His cells were struggling, and his sixth sense continued to grow. He felt his body shrink, as if he was going to be imprisoned for 1,000 years. He couldn't wait to break free from whatever haunting force choked the liberty from his being. The last time I tried training Jade Skin, the Dongshin Sutra is what woke me up. But right now, it isn't doing anything. Maybe it's because this time there is no danger? Perhaps I should push further and give this a genuine try. Under the effects of his seemingly inhuman sense of apathy, Han Sen started to strike against his first gene lock. All the cells in his being began raging, burning hot with a sense of power he hadn't felt before. It was like pushing against an invisible force with immeasurable strength, and as it occurred, Han Sen's teeth chattered and his body trembled. But despite the writhing of his cells, his mind was calm and cool like a marble statue. And that's how he sat there, unmoving. His sixth sense was getting even sharper now, and it's continued to grow larger and larger. At the same time, Han Sen's mind conjured up a strange image. Through the wall, he could see the people in the next training room. Han Sen knew this wasn't because he had been gifted X-ray vision, but through the accelerating growth of his seventh sense. Just by hearing the sounds, his mind's eye could construct an image depicting exactly what was going on in the next chamber. That was the nature of the seventh sense. It was a person's ability to analyze time and space, in their past, present, and future forms. Han Sen's seventh sense was stronger than most people's, and right now it had been amplified by an order of magnitude. It was sharper than the sharpest blade. Suddenly, the sound of broken ground sent a shockwave through Han Sen's body. He felt something within him break, and now he was overwhelmed with a feeling of release. It was as if he had been incarcerated for 1,000 years and now he was free. He was feeling incandescent, as if he could command the skies, as if he could fly, as if he had been reborn as an angel. Everything is born Alea. It's already here. It is full and clear. The same as Nirvana. Han Sen didn't receive any new icy powers after unlocking his first gene lock, but the strength of his body was dramatically increased. That wasn't the most important boon he had received, however. Most importantly, Han Sen's seventh sense had received massive amplifications. It had reached the max proficiency a human could achieve, which gave Han Sen a curious feeling. He couldn't quite explain it, but it made Han Sen view the world in a different way. He could see things as he had never seen them before. Han Sen could not tell what future changes this talent would bring, but maybe it was because of his fitness that he didn't actually fully unlock his gene lock. He felt as if he had unlocked it, as much as he hadn't. He couldn't quite put a finger on anything right now. Han Sen walked out of the training room with his gene lock opened. His heart felt strange, and as he walked, he felt as if the walls around him were disintegrating. He was able to see everything, beyond what any human eye could behold. But he also felt as though his body was being encased in ice. Sound, temperature, light. These things and more became simple rules of additional deduction in his mind. So great was his vision now, that even if he closed his eyes, he could still see what was in front of him. This is too amazing. This feeling is too amazing. Han Sen wanted to be happy, but strangely, he was unable to feel any particular emotion. It felt as if everything was pre-purposed and almost expected, therefore nullifying the need to be explicitly surprised or happy. As Han Sen continued walking, he suddenly noticed a woman removing her clothes. It was Annie. She had long legs, pale white skin, and massive boobs. He could see it all. But when Han Sen paid closer attention, he noticed there was a wall separating them, and that Annie was actually in her changing room. It was a thick wall like any other, but his vision provided a clearer image than any thermal vision apparatus could. In his current situation, however, Han Sen did not feel any sensation of lust. Viewing Annie's amazing body, he might as well have been looking at a mannequin. He noticed her being as naked as she was, but then turned and continued on his way. He walked around the base and noticed a pain encroaching in his head. He knew that his fitness level would have difficulty supporting the unlocked gene lock. Therefore, to prevent further pain, he exited gene lock mode. His body reverted to its prior feelings of being bound, and he lost the amazing feelings he had previously been drenched in. His fitness returned to normal and his seventh sense reduced. Although it did not bear the fruit of elemental powers, I like it. It's not bad.
Han Sen final I smiled.
After turning off his gene lock, his emotions returned. He no longer felt like one of the heartless monsters of the Shui family. Now, he was back to his former, chirpy self. I wonder what kind of powers I would have received if I had unlocked the gene lock with the Dongshin Sutra. It would have been greater than Jade Skin, that is for sure, Han Sen predicted. Also, I wonder what my level is, compared to evolvers who have already unlocked their gene lock. Han Sen knew that Jade Skin basically increased the current talents and abilities his body possessed, with nothing extra. Therefore, he wasn't sure how he'd fare in a fight, going against those with elemental powers. Returning to his room, Han Sen called Huang Fu Pingqing. Soon after, the communicator on the other end was picked up, and her image filled the screen. Han Sen almost felt his nose start to bleed. Huang Fu Pingqing was only wearing a very thin pajama gown, which revealed a lot of skin. You could even see through the fabric, to a certain degree. Although not everything was on display, what could be seen was seductive and a little teasing. Little Junior, why have you come looking for me? There must be a reason for this call. I doubt you're checking in to see how I am. Huang Fu Pingqing seemed to deliberately lean forward, presenting Han Sen with a full-screen image of the trench that parted her perfect breasts. Senior, Queen told me that I should talk to you if I ever needed to seek her out. Han Sen's lips may have been moving, but his gaze had not. There would be no harm in such a stare, after all. Noticing his shameless gaze, Huang Fu Pingqing felt a little awkward. She widened her eyes to stare back at Han Sen and grabbed a coat to veil her body. She then said, "Why are you looking for Queen?" "Senior, please tell her that after much deliberation, I have decided to join her team," Han Sen told her. Now that he had successfully unlocked his gene lock, with his fitness at the top, he didn't need to worry about not being on par with the others on Queen's team. He was eager to see what sort of super creature they would be hunting. Han Sen knew it was extremely difficult for someone to hunt a super creature by themselves, so cooperating with others was not something he frowned upon. By following Queen, he'd definitely have the opportunity to witness the true powers that super creatures held. After all, the silver fox was just a pup, and its strength must pale in comparison to a fully grown super creature. She invited you onto her team? Huang Fu Pingqing gave Han Sen a look of surprise. Didn't she tell you?
Han Sen lugte her strændelig.
Queen told Han Sen to look for Huang Fu Pingqing when he was ready to join her team, so it was fair of him to assume that she would know about the deal. Han Sen was surprised to learn that she wasn't aware. A person like her doesn't talk to me that much, Huang Fu Pingqing said. Then, after a brief pause, she continued, but she's a proud woman. Why would she value having a commoner such as you on her team? I remember a few evolvers requesting spots on her team a while back, and they had unlocked gene locks and everything, but they were turned down. Why would she turn down those evolvers, but instead personally request your position on the team? I almost find it difficult to believe. You must be quite the charmer. I'm nothing special. I'm not the president yet. I still have a long road to traverse before I reach the top. Han Sen wiggled his nose as he spoke. Huang Fu Pingqing had already built an immunity to Han Sen's shameless self-admiration. I will make sure to let her know, leastways. But, as for when you'll receive a response, I don't know. It all depends on her mood. I thank you regardless. When I have retired from the army, remind me to buy you lunch sometime.
Han Sen smiled.
Okay, I'll hold you to that.
Huang Fu Pingqing returned Han Senes smile.
After their conversation concluded, Han Sen went to a testing lobby. He wanted to see what sort of power he had reached, having now unlocked his gene lock. To do a complete test, Han Sen went to an exclusive testing lobby at the army base. Not the ordinary, virtual community one. After he selected his desired strength for the test, he entered the testing room. Inside, a half-human cyborg appeared in front of him. This droid, designed exclusively for combat testing, was built to resemble a human. It was actually composed of many other smaller robots. After a certain amount of damage had been dealt to the droid, it would shatter. But then, it could quickly rebuild itself. After seeing Han Sen enter a testing lobby, Annie was again watching his every move. Quickly, she went to the observation room so she could see how he was performing. The test Han Sen was undertaking had been designed to accurately measure the dexterity of his abilities. He had never taken this test before, so Annie did not actually know what his proper level was. With Han Sen now taking this test, Annie wasn't going to let this opportunity for observation pass her by. But due to the difficulty Han Sen had selected, Annie couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He had chosen a difficulty level of 100, which meant Han Sen would only need a level of 100 to beat it. Annie already knew that his power was well above 100. Since she was here, anyway, she stayed to watch how he operated. Han Sen hadn't chosen a stronger difficulty because he knew about the prying eyes, and he knew anyone could be watching from the observation room. He did not yet wish to reveal his true strength. Han Sen's primary goal in the testing lobby was to flex and push the boundaries of the new special senses he had received by unlocking his gene lock. Therefore, he did not need to select a harder difficulty. Anyway, Han Sen crushed the testing droid swiftly, and it quickly rebuilt itself as two. After Han Sen destroyed both robots again, they too duplicated. When the four appeared before him, Han Sen quickly cut them down. Then again when 8 appeared. And in this way, he kept going. Han Sen rapidly tore through the robots with ease. After watching for a while longer, Annie's face started to turn heavy. The difficulty Han Sen had selected may not have been high, but the way he was slicing through the droids was special. She did not notice it at first, but after watching for a while, her face twisted. These droids had the established behavior for duplicating on defeat. This meant the more Han Sen killed, the more there would be. And the more droids there were, the more attacks would come Han Sen's way. Unlike humans, they were systematic and did not have to think. This also meant there was less room for error. Such robots didn't make mistakes, and their precision greatly exceeded the capability and reliability of humans. Although these attacks could not threaten Han Sen's life, the way he cut down the droids surprised Annie. Han Sen, despite dodging and avoiding every single attack, did not even turn around to look at the swings and slashes that were coming his way. He could accurately destroy each droid from behind. Even when many droids attempted to strike him at the same time, he did not have to turn around to dodge and strike back. Annie almost couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was as if Han Sen had grown eyes in the back of his head. Strength and speed were things that could be vigorously trained and improved upon, but this was something new to Annie, and she wasn't quite sure how he could have developed this power. From what she was witnessing, she did not believe such precision could come from a quick and accurate analysis of noise in the room, either. Han Sen did not make a single mistake. He was flawless. It was as if he had rehearsed this before, and he knew each move every droid was going to make. Annie didn't believe even she could do something such as that. As time went by, Han Sen only seemed to get better and better. It was as if he had achieved the sight of gods, and was able to look forward through time and predetermine where and when each droid was going to attack. Combined with the Dongxian Sutra, Han Sen had enabled what might best be described as prophet mode. Every strike against him seemed futile, and hitting him would most likely require surpassing the speed of light. 32 robots were the maximum allowed inside the room at once. Even with such a large number, none of them had even managed to lay a finger on Han Senator. He annihilated each of them, and all it took was one punch, his fists gliding through their metallic exteriors with almost no resistance. As if they were strapped into a noose, Annie's eyebrows had become incredibly tight. She thought Han Sen looked different, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. She looked puzzled. Annie wanted to report to Ji Ruozhen immediately about what she had just witnessed. But as she continued to watch, She didn't even know how she might articulate the insane magnitude of Han Sen's precision as he fought. After Han Sen had finished his testing, he quickly left the lobby. Annie, however, remained in the observation room with a recording of his practice, as she was keen to rewatch and review what she had just seen. Han Sen was very impressed with his newfound abilities, following his unlocking of the gene lock. Although he hadn't been granted any special, elementally infused powers, what he had been given made a massive difference. Han Sen thought it was sick. He also appreciated how discreet his powers were at first sight. No one would be able to tell he had actually unlocked his first gene lock. He thought this could prove to be quite beneficial further down the road. Returning to the shelter again, he found that Zhu Ting had been looking for him. "Boss, I have found a sacred blood creature. Come and help me slay it." "Sure," Han Sen agreed, partially due to the fact he still felt guilty for what he had put Zhu Ting through with the red mushrooms. He also agreed to go without the promise of a return. Even though hunting sacred blood creatures wasn't a focus for him right now, having unlocked his first gene lock, it would prove to be far easier for him. He also imagined he could even take a trip to the seabed, hunt freely in the ocean's depths, and raise the sacred geno points of his angels at a much quicker pace. Following the speedy agreement, Zhu Ting led Han Sen to Devil's Mountain. But Han Sen frowned and said, "Since when have you been coming to the Devil's Mountain?" Thunder Devil and his people used to tell tales about the creatures that inhabited Devil's Mountain and the special abilities they possessed. It was a very dangerous place to venture. "Don't worry, I have only observed it from the foot of the mountain. I have not dared to traverse its treacherous slopes," Zhu Ting explained. Han Sen nodded in response and did not say much. Unsure of what lay ahead, he was at least confident of his ability to escape from the clutches of a super creature now that he had unlocked his gene lock. Not all super creatures actively pursued humans and sought to kill them on sight, though, so Han Sen thought they'd be all right if they kept out of their way. The slopes of the mountain weren't icy and snowy. Instead, they were draped in fertile greens and dotted with luscious trees. "Boss, there it is." Zhu Ting was not lying. Having started their climb of Devil's Mountain, Zhu Ting pointed towards a peculiar knoll. This knoll he was pointing at skirted Devil's Mountain at the border of the ice field. Han Sen followed Zhu Ting, and he led them up a small, craggy knoll. A few vines and trees prospered atop it. When they were halfway up the knoll, a lizard-looking creature snagged their attention. It was eating the vines that wove their way across a cliff that connected with the hilltop. Han Sen looked at the creature, which was actually of considerable size. It was about a meter long, and instead of scales, it boasted beautiful blue skin. It looked to be a meaty prize. Although this knoll may not be very high, it would be difficult to fight it on the cliffside it is currently eating from, Han Sen said, after observing it for some time. "If it was an easy task, I wouldn't have come and requested your aid. Do you have any suggestions?" Zhu Ting politely asked.
Idag.
"You wait here." As Han Sen said this, he summoned his blood scale armor. He planted his legs firmly on the cliffside and began running up.